Ladies and gentlemen, I am so blessed, so happy to have this entrepreneurial podcaster, business coach, someone that just understands all the things about how to reinvent yourself. I mean, I heard her story when she got a chance. I got the honor to be on her podcast, and now I get to return the favor. So, Priscilla Shumba, welcome to the God and Gig Show. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Alan. Thank you so much for having me. I get so nervous when I'm actually the guest. And I think you gave me a diagnosis there that it's kind of the control freak in me that doesn't want to be a guest on people's podcast. You could be onto something. I think you are, Alan.
I don't
Thank you
want
so much for having me on this amazing podcast.
I don't want to start the show by saying I accused you of being a control freak. Now, come on now, Priscilla. That's no way to. I'm teasing. I'm teasing because I think even as we start, and I'm going to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself, and as you are a fellow podcaster, as we enjoy this medium of sharing stories, of sharing our faith, sharing what our journeys are like, it is a place where we get to be transparent, right? We are thousands of miles apart in two different continents, and yet we can share like that. Hey, this is just what we're dealing with. I'm imperfect, you're imperfect, and we get to grow together. So, for those people meeting you for the first time, I know every podcaster hates this, even now that I get to interview you. But can you give people just a quick summary, the 30-second elevator pitch of, what you do and kind of like what your platform is all about?
Sure. Okay, my name is Priscilla Shumba, and I'm a podcaster primarily. I have the Reinventing Perspectives podcast. And what it is really sort of like what you said, Alan. It's just kind of me taking people along the journey that I'm on of sort of being an early entrepreneur, trying to figure things out and trying to find people who can help me and help the audience along in their journey as new entrepreneurs. So that's what the platform is about. And I think the most important aspect, I think, which really differentiates my podcast from different ones, and which is similar to yours. So I think we're sort of kindred spirits speaking today. So this is great. Is there's a faith component to it because I feel as a person who loves Jesus, and not to say I'm perfect, as a person who loves Jesus, and I really want to reach out to people who are people of faith, even of various faiths, and to bring faith and business together and help us to move along together. So that's me.
Oh, now that's you in the nutshell in terms of your podcast. Now, this is where I want to unpeel the onion and get to the person behind the podcast and why this is a passion for you, why this connection between business and faith. So, first, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your cultural background, your childhood, or at least your young adulthood, and just how you even started on this journey? Where did you start in terms of where you grew up? And did you have an interest in business early on, or was that something that came later?
Well, okay, let me take you way back. Let me take you to I grew up in a place called Mashaba. I know people who are listening are like, what's that? Well, don't worry about it. It's in Southern Africa. It's a tiny little mining town in Southern Africa. So I came from a really, really small place. And as a Zimbabwean, that's my country of birth, proudly Zimbabwean. At some point I had to leave to seek, go to college and to sort of learn what the world is about. And I came to the United States and I learned in Massachusetts. So I had that experience of sort of being moved from a completely different culture, African, not just African, African from a teeny tiny, tiny place. I think
Yeah.
people from teeny tiny places can get this. Even moving to a bigger city is like a big shock. So going from a teeny, teeny, tiny place to Boston, Massachusetts, um, my mind just was wide open. I just couldn't believe just the opportunity to learn and to meet different people and to get different ideas. It absolutely just shaped really a big part of my ideas and the things that I knew and gave me confidence really. Because at that point, I think I told you as a faith-based entrepreneur, I just felt, wow, how did I get here? Do I even belong here? When you walk through the university and you're thinking, and I got a scholarship to the university, and you're thinking, wow, how did I really get here? Thinking of where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah.
Do I
And what
even
were you,
belong
what
here? I'm
what
just
were
in
you
awe.
studying, by the way? What were you studying?
Interesting story there. I think
Ah,
this is the creative part of me. Um, so I started off at a community college and I had no idea what to study, but I felt like I had a little bit of a knack for communication and stories. And I remember my professor at the community college said, don't do that because you're going to be so poor and you're going to work so hard and you're not going to earn any money. So don't do that. And being young and not thinking things through, I thought, well, I took his word for truth, right? And I said, okay, so I probably should leave that alone because he told me and he knows better. And then I was at a loss of, okay, then what do I do? And then I met a professor who was just amazing. And then I thought, well, I'll just do what she teaches because she's really amazing. And then I joined gender studies. And I think part of it is sort of being a girl child in a family with three boys and a girl that really spoke to me. Being an African woman that really
Mm.
spoke to me. So I studied gender studies and I got the scholarship to the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where I continued with that. So gosh, to sort of try to condense the story, I finished my undergraduate women's empowerment, feminist everything, and then I go back to Zimbabwe, and that doesn't mean anything.
Wow.
Yes. So here I am looking for work, and because of just to give you a context, sort of something like 90% unemployment at that point in time.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So there's a whole, the universities, the schools are churning out graduates, and there's no industry to absorb them.
So they're literally getting this education, and like you said, just it's like a ceiling, like a not a glass ceiling, like a concrete ceiling. It feels like there was nowhere to go.
Absolutely. And I think it's a story that a lot of people don't really understand that in a lot of African countries, you have a lot of very educated people, but the opportunity doesn't exist for you to do anything with the education. So it's frequent you can find unemployed engineers, you can find unemployed nurses, you can find unemployed teachers, you can find unemployed everything. It doesn't really matter because there's no industry to really absorb you. So I joined that mass of young people who, you know, have education ideas and
Yeah.
nowhere to put them. And then I figured, how will I introduce myself? And I said, oh, you meet people, what are you doing? And I figured, I'll just call myself an entrepreneur. I wasn't an entrepreneur at all. I wasn't doing anything. But I figured, well, if I just say entrepreneur, that ends the conversation. They're not going to ask me anything further.
It's kind of
And
a blanket, like you said. It could be anything. It could be an entrepreneur in any field, any type of thing that you eventually decide to do. It kind of go. I love it, and it gave you an opening. Also, I think it just is funny that you gave the label. I don't know if you were, like you said, didn't have an idea at the time, but it's funny how God might have put a seed in the ground, even with you using
yes,
that word.
yes, I always laugh because I'd go back to my Instagram and I just wrote entrepreneur over there because you meet people and the first thing they ask and is, well, what do you do? That's just
Yeah.
natural conversation everywhere in the world. And you're unemployed, there's no hope of employment. You feel as if because you're not working, it must mean you're sort of worthless or
Mm.
although you get a lot of identity from work, which a lot of people sort of don't realize until you don't have work. So then you figure, oh gosh, I can't tell people I'm not doing anything. I'll just say I'm an entrepreneur. And that was the beginning, Alan.
That's so incredible. I love the fact that you, number one, the culture shock. And I think this is where we both have a heart for people who are starting, who are trying new things. It's a leap of faith, right? And so you have a leap of faith to go to a whole new country, to a whole new, like you said, from a small town to a huge city, from one continent to another, and then to leap back and say, okay, I'm going to bring this. So I'm asking really what was happening in your heart and in your mind in terms of what you thought for the future. Did you see, once you were in this place back in Zimbabwe, did you feel, was it the hopelessness? Was there a sense of, okay, God, what now? Like when you get to that point when you kind of don't know where to turn, like what was your heart and spirit telling you in terms of what the future might hold at that point? And did it start to materialize?
So at the beginning, I was just so hopeful, I had all these ideas and I really had a strong feeling of just wanting to empower women. I was really just on fire for that. And then the only thing I knew at that point was, well, I've got to get a job somewhere where I can use this impact. And when I couldn't get the job, and, at some point after you've sent several hundreds of resumes out, after you've knocked on several doors, after you've told everyone in your network to help you, and they've told you they'll call you back next month, call them next month, and a couple of years in and still nothing is happening. At that point, I think it was just a sense of hopelessness. I even questioned, was what I was thinking, the did I think wrong somewhere along the way? Did I think
Mm.
God was saying something that he wasn't saying? Was it my own ideas and absolutely nothing to do with God? Have I even been hearing the right thing? I questioned all those things. And at that point, I really just felt quite hopeless. And this is where something interesting happened. At the church that I was attending, there was a lady there. We didn't really know each other well, but I'd seen her as I was growing up before I even went to America. And she came to me and she said, "Come and visit me at my office. I'm a professor at the local university, and I want you to join the MBA program." I didn't know anything about an MBA. I didn't know anyone who had a business degree. So to me, I didn't even have any kind of inclinations of that matter. And then because I was just in a state of like, oh, what am I going to do on Monday anyway? I've got nothing to do. So,
Yeah.
and because just the cultural respect, if an older person approaches you and asks you to do something, you don't say no, even if you don't want to do it. So I'm just like, well, Auntie from the church asked me to come over. I'll just go. Then she had everything. She said, "This is the paperwork. Fill it out right now. And I'm going to talk to your father." I just filled it out. I had no hope, no expectation. I'm just kind of, you know, whoever asked me to do something that day, I'll do it. If anybody needs help with this that day, I'll do it. I
Yeah,
got
follow.
nothing else to do. And that's how I got into an MBA program. And the first day, I go into the program and people begin to introduce themselves, maybe a class of 15. And it's like, oh, I'm a manager, senior manager at this and this company. And oh my gosh, literally, I was sweating, Alan. I was sweating because I was like, at some point, it's going to get to me. And then what am I going to say? I don't have
Yeah.
anything to say. So then I went back to, I'm an entrepreneur.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
It
It's
keeps on giving.
I love it. And what was I guess the response to people in that environment? Number one, you're talking about the culture, and you talk about now you're kind of stepping into a whole nother place. Did people see and feel? How do you feel you were received? I guess is the question. Were you received as an equal? Were you received based on your gifting and your talent, or was there something that you felt like you still had to prove?
I think in the beginning, people sort of laughed because I think they sort of got it. But because I was fairly much younger than the other people in the class, they kind of took me like, our daughter, she's in the class. That's how they kind of took me. So they
Wow.
said, oh well, she's gonna be sort of like the room monitor. She'll do all the little errands. That's the job that we're gonna give her. Because I'm the person who's sort of like unemployed. Everybody else is a manager wherever company brought them to study their MBA. And I'm just kind of there because Auntie from church sort of said, hey, go and sit in that class, and she works there. So I took that on. And like I said, culturally, whatever they asked me to do, I did it, and I did it with the heart to do it. And over time, they would laugh every time I had to introduce myself, but they took me in, and I took it seriously because I felt like I had something to prove. I knew I didn't belong there, and I knew that I was out of place. And so I felt if there was an assignment, I overdid it because
Mm.
I didn't want another reason to for people to, and she doesn't even belong here. And look at how she's performing.
Yeah. So that was a impetus, a drive, a motivation to again. I think that's where it's proving yourself. But it's clear that if you were doing the work and the person believed in you, that even gave you the shot. Um, I think that's sometimes the validation comes from outside and sometimes the validation comes from inside, right? And sometimes God puts something in you that you don't know you're capable of. Just look at Moses, and there's 1,000 examples in the Bible where God calls someone. It's like, and they literally say, "I'm not the one,"
Mm.
Gideon or whatever. And it sounds like you said, I was struck by the word you just said, faithful, doing everything that you were told to do and overdoing it. I would equate that to going the second mile. There were
Mm.
some very powerful aspects of faithfulness and obedience and trust that you were showing, even though it sounds like you were kind of, in a sense, like floating a little, trying to figure things out. But there were some principles you were operating in that were very, very much directed toward absolutely what success comes from. Success comes to hard work, from sticking with it, from following the people in the path, even when you don't know the path. So you were following some success principles that clearly you may not realize it, like you said at the beginning, but they've they've worked for you, it seems.
They did. Another time I didn't know it because I remember sometimes in between classes I would sit outside on my own, and some days I would even cry
Hmm.
because I just felt I had no idea what was going on. Remember, I was thinking, oh, I'm gonna just be this gender person, women empowerment person, right? And here I am in an MBA with managers. And I had no inclination, well, I had no conscious inclination of anything business like. I don't even know what I'm doing there. But because I'm there, I'm going to do my best.
Yeah,
Because somebody put me there, I'm going to do my best because I don't want her to hear that I'm not doing my best and I don't want to let people down.
that's powerful. And I love the fact that we're talking about really what your podcast is all about, reinventing. Because you said you saw yourself as one thing, that didn't work out specifically the way you thought. And now you come to this place where you do have to kind of see yourself the way other people see you and maybe even prove to them and to yourself. So tell me something that validated it where you saw, okay, I do belong. Tell me a moment, a accomplishment maybe, but it doesn't have to be accomplishment. It could have been internal, could have been a thought. But what was a moment that you realized that God was kind of reaffirming that, yes, you've either made it or I've showed you that you are on the right journey? What was that moment like for you, or was there an example of it?
Yes, there were actually two moments. So in the final semester, I remember the chairman of the university was teaching a class, and he had sort of a certain way about him. It's a sort of generational thing. It In certain cultures it'd be quite offensive, but I think in if you think of the context, he had a sort of way of talking to women, and he had a sort of like jokes about women that he'd kind of just throw there, which culturally is sort of okay. I
Hmm.
think in a first world context, it's not okay, but in that context, people don't really take offense with when certain people of power, of status, sort of kind of throw out certain jokes. And I remember it got to the point where all the women in the class were not attending anymore. And I was the only one attending
Wow.
those classes every single time. And then he would say to me, he'd say all kind of things and to kind of rile people up. And he'd say, no, 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 it's just to keep the class alive, that kind of thing. And all the other women are like, no, we're not standing for this. We're leaving. But I, being class monitor, and I just show up every day, and I didn't mind that he had kind of those jokes. Not that I didn't mind, but I knew why I needed to make sure I was present. And at the end of the semester, he called me and he said, I'm very struck by you. You've been in every single class. People have left, but you've never left. I've sort of put jokes upon you, and people have sort of used you to make certain jokes, and you're still here every single day. I'd carry his laptop, I'd do everything he needed me to do, I'd set up his things if he needed me to do. And then he offered me a job,
Wow. Wow.
which I didn't take just
Wait.
because of the energy
Yeah,
that
I was
had
going to
sort of been
say.
there.
So like but you again, it's a proving thing. Like he's like, okay, this is something that this is someone that maybe I should have respected all along, and obviously got the respect enough to at least offer your position. I can, wow, what an amazing, and to be able to say no.
Yes, because I just felt the energy wasn't right. Yeah. And I do get that at a certain generation, cultural, they may not see that certain things are just not okay. You
Yeah,
know, mm,
not every opportunity is a good opportunity, and it's
exactly.
yeah, yeah. That's really wise and really powerful that you saw that, even though you had to endure that. I'm curious because you've mentioned several times about the culture. This is maybe a little aside. Maybe this will be another podcast that you and I could talk. But you've mentioned many times about your desire to see women empowered, the fact that you took a gender studies class and yet you were back in this field where in this culture where women were clearly not being treated the way. So I'm just wondering, did that fire ever kind of become something that you felt was God was calling you in this area? Were you feeling any kind of call to empower women in business in your home country because you kept seeing this lack of respect and cultural ceiling put on you?
What it did for me is it made me realize that my heart for it was right, but my approach to it was wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah. I can't remember where I heard it that before, something like before you do something of significance, you must make sure you do something of importance. And I think I try to do those the other way. Looking back, my heart for gender studies was right. My heart for women empowerment was right. It just so happens that I'm a girl in a family of three boys. I mean, it's just is what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that seed already was in me from just being an only girl among boys and just being in that environment. But I think what I should have done is said, and I think to the young people, I think this is really important to much, much younger people, if you have them in your life, to say, don't worry so much about doing the thing that's deep in your heart. Try to build something that's solid first. So I should have done it the other way, where maybe I could have done business had I known, and then try to impact women, or maybe try to do something where women are, there are not a lot of women in those industries, and then try to help women. So I needed to do something of importance first and then go after the passion, not to go after the passion and then try to do something of
Wow,
significance.
that's powerful and very tough because we are hearing all over the world and not just, in America, but all over the world about you have to chase your passion. And yet it's what the picture that came to mind when you said that was you have to build the ark before you can invite people into it. And
That's it.
yeah, it just seems like, and it's hard because again, entrepreneurs, creatives, we want to chase the thing that makes us feel good, but maybe God, especially in your case, it seems like He really was kind of keeping you in the crucible a little bit. It might have been frustrating for you, but clearly, even in terms of that, like He's shown you some clear lessons that now you are showing, right? So maybe it wasn't at that time that the message was going to become clear, but now with your podcast and with what you're doing now, it seems that that message is going out. So what would you say to the person right now that is kind of at that beginning stage, that's kind of wrestling between, I heard someone say it like this recently in my church, between purpose and passion. Their purpose will be one thing, but right now they feel this passion to do it and they have to start. So what would you say to that person that's wrestling maybe at the beginning of an entrepreneurial journey or something like that?
I would say this. I would say sometimes the thing you need to do is right in front of you, but it doesn't look exciting. I would say go back, especially if you're a person of faith, work with what's in your hand. Don't work with what's in your head. Work with what's in your hand until what's in your hand is strong enough for you to leverage that to do what's in your head. I think that is what I would tell sort of my younger self. Because there's that Bible verse that says, be careful of building castles in the air. And I think there's a certain generation, and probably I'm also part of that generation, where we had so much of like motivation put on us and so much of like passion driven kind of ideas put toward this. And then we kind of just flew with that. And
Yeah.
we built castles in the air. And that creates a lot of disappointment. Instead of looking at what's in my hand, let me build what's in my hand, what's in my field, let me plow what's in my field. And when that's big enough, I'll have the leverage to do what's in my head.
The picture I had is being faithful, obviously with the little, with the faithful, with the two talents, faithful with the one talent, but also what Jesus says about counting the cost and whether you even have enough to build the thing. And this is again one of those very, very, very. It's very tough, but it's. I love what you said. As I wanted to just stop the podcast right there, or let them rewind that part that you just said about going with what's in your hand, and it is not exciting. It is very sometimes. I can think of right now what you just said about carrying the briefcases, doing the little things in that class that might have been felt menial, right? I've heard it said like this that you never know if you're a servant until you're treated like one. And that's when you find out where your heart is if you have a heart of a servant. So now let's fast forward to some of the where God has kind of taken you because you clearly went through what you went through because God had something for you to share. And now you're able to do that. So tell me, when did the podcast become a reality? Was it after you started to build something of your own? Was it that you wanted to tell the stories? What it seems like all these things coalesced in your podcast where these messages started. So when did that become like a reality for you that you said, I got to share this message?
Okay. Um, I'll take you back a little bit for 2 seconds. So graduation day, one of the professors who I felt really didn't like me because he felt I was sort of like, he was right. I had a friend who put me in the class where I didn't belong, and he felt a certain way about that.
Yeah.
God will put you in places. God will put you in places, right? So he came to me and he whispered in my ear, "Do you realize that you were 0.1% away from being the top in this class for the year?" He didn't have to tell me that. I would have never known that. And I felt he didn't really appreciate that I was in the class, but he came and he told me that. And that I just felt was just confirmation for all the tears that God was saying, this is your thing. This
Yeah.
is your thing. Because if all these people with all the experience and all the things that they have and all the knowledge, and if you can be the person who says, oh, you were this close to being the number one for the year in that class, that just validated to me. So post that, I'm not figuring, well, what do I do with my life now? Because I have a whole bunch of education and I don't know what to do with it. And I
Yeah.
never thought about business. And now I've got this business degree, right? And then I thought I only know two things. I know that I love God. That's where the faith part of the podcast comes from. And I know now that I have this mechanics of business in me, and I know business. The passion had just been set on fire through that whole process. So I said, look, I'll do Faith and Business podcast. I'm a new entrepreneur. How will I get information? How will I get to network with people? I don't know anyone. Nobody knows me. And then I started writing for a blog. I don't know if you know Alex Sanfilippo
Yes,
from
yes. We
Podmatch.
just
Yes.
yes, just finished just got off the platform a little while ago. He's an amazing, amazing, amazing individual.
Yes. He doesn't even know me. But I was writing for his blog, Daily Paradigm Shift, as a Christian writer when he started Podmatch. And then he invited all the writers to join Podmatch and to start podcasts. And that's how I got into podcasting. It wasn't like a I'm writing these free Christian blogs because I feel, well, at least I can contribute to people, faith people. And then I fell into podcasting, and that's how it started. And so, I don't know if I've got to run away from your question now.
No, it's a perfect. You answered it perfectly because again, it seems that you took the little. A lot of people don't think blogging is a big deal anymore. They think, oh, blogging was 2009, 2010. You took what was available to you once again, and the right people saw it and invited you in. And again, Alex is a strong believer, even though his company doesn't have to lead with that because his company is simply just excellence for everybody, right? For all podcasters, but very much a man of faith, saw what you were doing, and God once again orchestrated the direction, but you were faithful with the little. I love to draw threads and see threads through anybody's life, even though I can't always say I do it right. But that seems to me to be very clear. That every time you've been given a task or something that didn't seem like it was the thing, God kind of orchestrated it to where, like, yes, you're on the right path, like you said, even when you're not sure. And that's again something that I think a lot of beginning entrepreneurs and creatives need to hear. Because I just got a text from a friend asking, should I start blogging? Is blogging a thing? Can I make money doing it? And here you are explaining how blogging led you to what you're doing now.
Mm. I think people sort of we overthink and underdo.
Mm,
So you're not going to get the answer from thinking. It doesn't matter how much thinking you're going to do. You're going to get the answers because when you do, things become clear to you. When you start blogging, then you begin to research, oh, what do other bloggers do? You begin to talk to other bloggers. You begin to network in that field. Then you begin to learn, oh, this and this and this and that. But you can't think those things. Even if
yeah.
someone told you, they wouldn't make sense to you because you're not in the environment.
So true. You have to actually put yourself. I've heard someone, one of my other mentors that I follow, you have to be in the right place to be in the right place. Like
Mm,
it doesn't start with you, just like you said, thinking your way through it. You have to literally do things. And then God shows you. It's like there's always that step of faith, that first step of faith. I want to ask you, what would be a favorite if you had to pick someone? I know this is always a tough one to pick one person. If you had one person you'd want to interview, either in the faith space or even in business, like one person that you would love to have on your show, and tell me like what that person would be and why they inspire you, why you'd love to interview you. Maybe God will even hear it right now and say, okay, that's in our heart. We're going to make sure that's the next interview. But what's somebody that's in our space that you really inspires you and you would love to interview one day?
Uh, Definitely Jay Abraham. He's a marketing, I mean, he's sort of like the guy who advises all the big people with their companies, and he's a business strategist. And at the heart of what I do, I'm a business strategist. And I'd always been looking to say, oh, who can I look up to? And he's the guy because he's
Mm,
so deeply intellectual, conceptual, and deeply business fundamentals kind of guy. He's not fluff. He's not hype. He's just, this is what should happen in a business. And I love that. I definitely want to interview Jay Abraham.
I would love to see that and hear that too. And one thing that I love that you mentioned him because he is one of the gurus, one like the originators, right? It says to me and to all of our listeners that you are following someone. I think you don't know who a person is until you know who they're following. And when you see who someone's following, you say, oh, that's where they're going, right? So obviously we're following Christ first, but then we also follow people that are within our field and we never stop learning. We never stop growing. And it's because you have people in your life like Alex Sanfilippo, like people that we follow virtually and follow their podcasts and read their books. And that's another thing I think a lot of beginners need to remember is that you can't stop growing, can't stop learning. You got to have somebody either virtually or physically that you're constantly learning from. Would you say that's one of the most important things for you and your development because you're rubbing shoulders with so many entrepreneurs and people like that? Do you also try to keep an inner circle of people that you're learning from all the time?
Absolutely. You're going to get tired. It doesn't matter what you try to do. And I think the bigger drive of the thing you have want to do, or the bigger thing you want to do, the more you're going to get so many challenges and you're going to get so tired along the way. And I find that being around people that inspire you, or even logging in virtually to people that inspire you or just give you a thought that you never had, it reignites that fire
Mm,
for the thing that you're trying to do. And that's so important because you can literally let go of your destiny. You can let it go because you're so tired.
mm.
So it's really important for anyone trying to do anything entrepreneurial or whatever. Make sure you have a habit of looking for inspiration.
That's so good. Looking outside and inside, looking at for community, and then looking obviously inside and what God has already placed inside you. I had to put this last little thing first because I kept looking up. If you're listening, you're not watching on YouTube. There's this koala behind Priscilla's head, and I was thinking, we never mentioned the fact that you had this one last pivot. We talked about Zimbabwe and Boston. We never talked about where you ended up. So tell us a little bit about where you are now and the fact that you have a little one somewhere around there that might want to get on the mic eventually. Just tell us where you ended up. How did God, where does God have you now and your current position and like what you're seeking in the future in the next few years?
Oh, for sure. So I'm currently in Australia. You can tell with the koala if you're watching. I'm based in Tasmania, which is an island state of Australia. This is a beautiful country. If you do get the opportunity, do come and visit. So many beautiful beaches and just great people. So um, that's my plug for Australia.
Nice,
So
nice.
now
We'll send it to the tourism board.
for sure. I'm now a mom. I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I'm living here in Australia with my husband. And funny enough, I ended up again in a mining town. Grew up in a mining town, ended up in a mining town in Australia. You never go too far from where you start, right?
Full
The
circle.
circle
Yep.
of life. Yeah, yeah, circle of life. Um, and really, my heart is this podcast, Reinventing Perspective. My hope is that the people who were in my situation or who are in my situation, who sort of have been sort of forced into entrepreneurship, or even if you've decided to be an entrepreneur, that you find the resources that are relevant, that what is happening in the world right now. Because sometimes, depending on where you are, you take for granted things like the internet.
Yeah.
And even knowing that there's such a thing as a podcast, you can take that for granted. So just having information that's up to date of how you move as an entrepreneur today, wherever you are, If you're in a village in the middle of nowhere, as long as you got the internet and you can listen in, I'm trying to give you that information so you can move. If you're in the United States and you're a new entrepreneur, I'm trying to give you that information so that you can move, be inspired, and get to the next stage and the next stage. My hope is to see people build businesses that last in their families.
Hmm.
That's my hope. And so that's the big vision that I'm going after. I used to do a lot of business strategies for small businesses and stuff, and I realized that even if I gave you the strategy for you to implement it, it might be hard. So now I want to give you the building blocks and the thinking. So I always try to give people the reason why we're doing something. So for example, I wouldn't just say like, "Oh, find you know find your niche,"
Yeah.
because we hear that a lot, and I heard that a lot. And because I heard it a lot, it just kind of washed over me. I needed to know why. Why should I find my niche? Right. And then kind of make it relevant, to make it interesting. So I would say probably like, for an example, I could say, when you find your niche, right, you're not really looking for topic niche, you're looking for person niche, because you
Mm,
want to talk directly to someone. And since we're talking God in gigs, even in your music, right? If you're a
exactly.
musician, you want to be talking directly to someone, not because that's the only person you want to talk to, but because if you can really hit that person in the heart space with the words that you're writing, anyone else, even who's not that person, will feel the heart deep energy coming from the words and will love it anyway. You don't have to love, I'll put a controversial person, you don't have to love Kanye West to appreciate that his music, when you hear it, it does something to you, even if though it wasn't written with you in mind, and maybe you're from different culture, different race, you have no idea about the US, you have no idea who Kanye West is. But because he spoke so deeply to someone, it moves even people whom he didn't write to. It's like poetry. It was
Mm.
written at a specific time about a certain person, but to someone. And because it's so deep, it moves you. So if you take those same concepts even with your business, we're not saying niche down because we don't want you to reach everyone. I'm not saying niche down because we're not saying other people are not interested. We're saying once you hit that thing, whatever it is, really deep and really touch that specific person, it radiates. So that's why
Mm.
we want to niche down. So I try to sort of like, give you why, and so that it kind of helps people to take action.
Ah, so good. I'm telling you, that was really a masterclass right there in terms of why. There's that word again. Why it's important to know something behind the strategy. It's not just tactics, it's mindset. It's again, we once again reiterate what the scripture says about that. That that it starts from what's inside your heart. That that you have to guard your heart because out of it flows the issue of life. What you have in your heart is your why. And that's where all of these ideas and concepts and things eventually that you implement, like you just said, come out. But I love the fact that you focus even on the musicians and the creatives and the artists. It's the same thing. And I think there's oftentimes, I'm glad that you mentioned that because a lot of times we think there's a line between business and creativity, and it's not. We are in the business of sharing our story. We are in the business of spreading joy and spreading even the gospel through what we do. Because when they meet us, they meet a representation of Jesus Christ, and it might be in a business room or it might be on a concert stage. Same thing. So I love the fact that you went there, and it's just so powerful that you have this passion. I see this blowing up. You and I are kindred souls because I think again we're going to see how our two worlds, and we're going to continue to build our platforms to help more creators and more entrepreneurs. So please tell them how they can stay connected with you, how they can follow the podcast, how they can learn more about you, and just continue this journey with you.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much, Alan. The audience, I really appreciate you listening in. And if you can find my podcast, I think it's in Apple, Spotify, all the various places, and it's Reinventing Perspectives podcast. And I have a website where I put a lot of free resources there. It's www.reinventingperspectives.com. And Alan, if you don't mind, I'm going to steal an extra 2 minutes. You see what I'm doing now? This is terrible.
Please, no, you're not stealing anything. What are you talking about? I would love to talk for another couple of hours. I was just making sure that I respected your time because you got a little one on over there just waiting for mommy to come back off the mic. So yeah, tell me what else we could talk about and what you'd like to share.
Sure. I was just thinking about, because we are creatives and we have creatives listening, and that issue again of like passion. sometimes you have to understand what your product is. And your product can be the passion, not necessarily what your offer is.
Hmm.
Um, so, for example, if we look even at companies like McDonald's, it's not about the burger, even it's not even so much about the real estate. Their product is happiness. Remember? The happy meal, the creating an environment where kids
So
can play
true.
while the parents are sitting. It's, you see, so if you take yourself like that, whatever your passion is, that's your product. So it doesn't matter if it's the music, what are you delivering? Joy, happiness, whatever whatever the passion is, your product can be that. And it's just the means in which it travels, which is different, but the product, whatever you serve, people will feel. If you think even about the late Tony Shea, it was about creating happiness again. That's what he wanted to spread. It wasn't about the shoes or, you know, the e-commerce business. So don't really feel like, oh, I've got to let go of my passion. You don't. Whatever you do that's in your hand, make sure that passion is embedded. That's your product. Even if what it is a poem. What are you serving? What are you delivering? That's the passion. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Alan.
Oh no, I am so glad. Look, I'm just going to say this right now, and speaking in faith, you're going to hear more of Priscilla in our membership community. I'm just going to speak it right now. I'm putting her on the spot because this is the kind of stuff that has to be shared in an area where sometimes even those that are listening right now, someone's going to want to go much deeper than what you just than what they just got from you because you clearly were on you were going to it down a line that will free some people from this confusion of wait, well, what am I really about? What am I really sharing? When you said the part about McDonald's and Happy Meal, like that's a boom, like a mind blowing moment for some people. They didn't realize that McDonald's wasn't selling hamburgers. And then they don't realize as musicians, we're not necessarily selling a song. We're selling freedom. We're selling the understanding of joy, the understanding of love and peace. And that is what we are giving again, a message. So now we got to get you back on the podcast and we got to get you in the membership community so you can share some master classes because I heard it. I heard it. You've got way more to share and I would love to do that, but we can't do that all on the podcast. So definitely follow Reinventing Perspectives. Make sure you stay with Priscilla and stay in touch with God and Gigs because we may have her doing some more stuff in the very, very near future. But Priscilla, until then, God bless you. Thank you so much for your heart and your authenticity. This has been an amazing conversation. And as I said, we can't wait to do it again.
Thank you, Alan. Honored. Thank you, audience.